correct? Do people, can people comment on what they've received in terms of their confirmations? What does it say?
July 7th.
July 7th for both,
Yeah,
yes?
all July 7th.
Yeah, but we do have to do the interview first, as we said earlier.
Mhm.
Interview first, you can do the exam the same day or another day before July 7th.
Okay, very good.
They did just send a correction email, so that may be where they made the correction for those of us that got it in the typo. So they just sent a correction email at 9:38. So look out for it.
Okay, so it's a typo then. If you see July 5th, it's a typo. Okay, people have just recently joined this meeting. What can you see in the chat portion? Do you see the sections of the competency dictionary that I've linked to before, or do I have to post those again? Have a look in the chat and see if you scroll up, if you see links to the competency dictionary or no.
No, can you post it please again? Thank you.
Post it again, no problem. Someone says they only see the French competencies. I think it's maybe you joined right as I was posting it here. So I'll just take the link and I'll copy the link and I'll post it again. So you should have access here. Paste again. So there's the French, and I'll find the English as well and post that. Okay, so as usual, are there any questions that are off the top? Any concerns? I don't like that this lady talks to me. I told her to be quiet. She tells me instead of joining. I don't need to know. All right, so now you should see, everybody who's on the line now should see the links in the chat. Do you see them? Bye.
Yeah, we received them. Thanks.
Okay. Here, and now, yeah, I turned you off. Announcement. Okay, so for results orientation, I don't have a definition from Global Affairs. And honestly, even the definitions that we're currently using are ones that we don't know if they're going to be the ones used for your exam. We'll just call it that, your exam. The reason that we're using these ones from inside Global Affairs Canada is because those are the ones that are available to us. What we've done is all bombarded HR to say, where are the definitions? They must provide ones that are open to the entire public service of Canada, because the entire public service of Canada was eligible to apply for this competition. And there are people in the competition right now who have never set foot in Global Affairs Canada. So you can't keep a definition behind the firewall of Global Affairs and then say, haha, we have the definition and you don't have it, and come now, we're going to go and test you on it. It really doesn't make any sense at all. So in my view, HR has to provide those definitions for every competency that's listed there in the written and in the oral section. Any questions? Any comments? Anything on your mind? Go ahead.
I did actually just send a link into the chat. Do we need to actually analyze those? It's like the leadership competency isn't going to apply to our case.
Let's see. I will open the link and see what it is.
Because FS-02 can also imply that we may have a management role. Therefore, I was wondering if we should also study that, or at least be aware of that.
Yes. Again, when you're looking at the competencies, the titles mean something, right? So the exact title has to be what's tested there. It can't be something kind of vaguely associated with it. It must be precise, the definition that they're employing. So what you've linked to are the key leadership competencies, and those are competencies that are in other promotion exercises have been assessed a different way. They've been assessed via a candidate achievement record. So you've heard people who've gone through EX1 competitions and FS3 competitions and whatnot. These competencies have been assessed through a certain writing exercise. Okay. Yeah. So, but again, if the title doesn't match, then that's not the competency that's being assessed.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. But it's not bad to have a look at what the definitions are, simply because some of the definitions, they're not going to be that different from each other at the end of the day. what you do want the exact one that HR is using, because you want to really make sure you follow the wording of what HR is going to be relying on, because whatever definition HR is using is what they're giving to your evaluator. And that's what your evaluator is basing their marking on, right? But in order to have an idea of what they're talking about, it's not, it's certainly not anything that's going to harm you. Let's have a look at it and see what that might be alluding to. Yes? Okay, any other questions or comments?
In the chat, someone asked if it was more based on personal example as opposed to hypothetical scenarios.
We don't know. It might be a mix. It might be half and half. It might be two that are hypothetical situations where they give you all of the scenario and expect you to respond to it. And then two are, based on your experience, tell us a time when you did such and such, and make use of the competencies when you answer the question, right?
CJ,
Yes.
I had a question. If we could address and maybe take a little bit of time on the results orientation side. I know, like when I was with the province, we were absolutely outcomes focused, and that often, was numbers, right? It could be potential sales, actual sales for a trade mission, for example. It'd be terrific to maybe, if you have some examples, when we say results orientation, how do you measure that? What are common KPIs or things that you would measure under, say, an advocacy strategy or something that would be at the FS-02 level?
Okay.
Just so we kind of get a sense, okay, this is how you've measured it in the past, and then we can think about how to weave that into our response.
Okay, so here what I'm going to do is actually pull a couple of links, because I was looking for a definition of results orientation and couldn't find anything that would be kind of generic across the whole public service. However, our friends at Immigration have competency dictionaries themselves that are specific to IRCC, right? So whatever the idea is behind these competencies, they've crafted them for an IRCC officer, who are FS officers as well, but not Global Affairs Canada officers. So you'll see there are two links that I've just posted in the chat. There's the English and the French. If you open the link, then it will take you to the public site of IRCC, where they have these different things defined. And certainly the English one will take you right to results orientation and a definition there and a progression of what that means. That's not going to be too far off from whatever Global Affairs Canada comes with, in my view, right? So I'll read it out for those people who have trouble kind of navigating. Results orientation is an overall concern for working well and surpassing a standard of excellence. Focuses on results to be achieved, promotes best practices, measures performance, and makes adjustments to improve both efficiency and effectiveness. Takes ownership of personal work objectives, as well as the objectives that may exist through collaboration with others. So the core competency is all about, does the person think about meeting and beating goals and taking calculated risks for measured gains? Then they progress through, they have 5 points rather, and they progress through. The first thing is that you work hard and you want to do your job well. The second stage of this competency, it says that you create your own measures of excellence. So you keep track of and measure outcomes against a standard of excellence that is not imposed by others. It's one you've made for yourself, and you manage multiple priorities effectively. By the time you're reaching the third stage of development of this competency, it means you improve the performance for yourself and for others. So that's making specific changes in the system or in your work methods to improve performance. You focus on hearing participants on the outcome, keeping people focused on the matter at hand, and then enforcing rigorous standards and procedures. Then it becomes setting and working to meet challenging goals. Of course, now by this time at stage 4, you're in that management kind of segment and management mindset, where you're setting objectives beyond the target set by management, maintaining commitment to goals in the face of obstacles and frustrations, and you're developing clear and challenging but achievable goals. And then the final one that IRCC has listed is takes calculated entrepreneurial risks, taking numerous sustained actions over time in the face of obstacles to reach the entrepreneurial goal, and commit significant resources and/or time in the face of uncertainty to improve performance, try something new, reach a challenging goal. Do you see? So that's how IRCC has defined results orientation.
Could you walk us through a specific example though with actual, the examples of KPIs that you've used?
Still letting people in. I have to think on it now. I don't have a particular example right off the top. I'd have to think on this.
Okay.
It might be, something like this. If I were crafting an exam or an interview question, I might talk about a major international event in which you are a key part. You have a key part a role to play in making this big international event take place, something like the G7, right? And then I would describe what your role is in that, and that, here are all the different challenges, and how do you, demonstrate this competency of results orientation? How do you maintain standards? How do you, set your goals? This kind of thing. That's where I would go with that, I think. Does that make sense? Any other questions right off the top? Okay. And Lukash, I know that you said in the chat that you're having trouble accessing that link. I'm wondering if it's because you're outside our organization and you don't have access to Teams documents. It might be that.
This is very, very likely. I am the lone wolf outside of the Global Affairs Canada sphere of things, so that might be it.
Yeah, well, you're not. There are other people as well who are outside, so don't think you're alone. Susan, please go ahead.
Okay, yes, so for the interview, I was just wondering, so the way I see it, there are 3 components. So the first part is the scenario and all their sub-questions. And the second part is I'm thinking about the competencies definition. And the third part is you mentioned before that for our purpose, we're going to focus on the second column for
at least.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Do we also include what's listed in the first column, or we just focus on the second and the third, for example?
Yeah, it really depends on the wording of the question. Lots of the things that are listed in the first column are kind of contemplated in the second, right? So if somebody says that, you take charge in a difficult situation and whatnot, and you help manage your own responses to difficult situations, that might be at section 2. And then section 1 would be, keeps calm when something, goes wrong, something of that nature. Do you see what I mean? So 2 is a progression from 1, it should be, right? So what I do is read them, read 1, read 2, have a look at 3, and then say, okay, I need to at least exemplify all of these elements from 1 to 2. But a lot of the elements in 2 are kind of understood. They build on what's already there in 1. But it depends on the competency, depends on the question, right?
Right. And CJ, what I wanted to ask is, because we only have like the 9 or 10 minutes to answer, and I'm just thinking, if I feel like I'm running out of time, do I focus more on answering the sub-questions, or trying to use keywords in the definition, or do I use the ones in the column? Because I feel I need to focus on one of them, and it would be hard for me to sort of hit all 3 within the time.
But remember that as far as I understand, you're not going to be able to bring anything with you into the exam, right? So you're coming in just with your mind and whatever your memory is of what you've studied before. So you're not going to be able to be making reference to these columns anyway. All you're going to have is your keywords where you remember, what is this competency all about? What is it all about? And what's expected of me as an FS2 officer? So you have your keywords from the definition that jog your memory as to what this competency says an FS2 officer should be doing, and how an FS2 officer should be reacting, right? That's all you got. So when you're answering the question, yes, you have to answer from the perspective of that competency, but your goal isn't to write down what's in the competency. Your goal is to answer the question. Make sure you answer the question more than anything else. And you structure your answer from the perspective of the competency. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so Maria's asking, should we focus on column 1 and 2 and 3 where applicable? Yes. And the reason I suggest that is because by the time, if you read through some of those competencies, when you start looking at column 3 and column 4, and all of those ones are 4 columns, column 3 and column 4, you'll notice you start talking about managing a team, influencing other people. Normally FS2s aren't doing that, right? FS2 is normally not a management level. That's not typically the norm. There are some cases in which FS2s are called upon to manage, but that's generally speaking not always what an FS2 is expected to do. Normally FS2s are expected to have maybe 1 or 2 people reporting to them who are more junior than they are, and then really you're supposed to work on your files and report to your manager. So if you're starting to see in the competency, it's talking about, you know, designs the program in such a way, well, you're not doing that as an FS2, right? So it doesn't make sense for you to try to answer from that point of view. As a matter of fact, it would be a bit strange because remember your evaluator is listening to your answer, reading your answer, and expecting to hear what an FS2 officer or competent FS2 officer would do. And so if they're talking about, you know, doing things that the program manager would do, who would normally be their boss, that's a bit strange, right? Please go ahead, Amal.
Hi, thank you, CJ. You mentioned as I was dialing in that so the first 4 or 5 competencies will be tested in the interview and only 2 competencies in the exam. Can you confirm? Thank you.
The way it's laid out in your confirmation email is the way it's going to be tested. So they list the number of competencies and then it says ability to express yourself orally. So that means everything that led up to ability to express yourself orally has now been confirmed, is going to be tested in the interview portion. Then you see another 2 competencies are listed, and then it says ability to express yourself in writing. And so that tells you that, again, it's been confirmed that those 2 competencies are being assessed in the written portion.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? All right, very good. How is everyone feeling now? Those of you who have been matched to mentors, have you reached out to your mentor?
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, very good. Our mentors, some of them were really quiet. I mean, I did write to them and said, look, tell me if you're not interested in participating, because this is a terrible time of year for this person to be called upon to do something like this, even though all the mentors are very keen to work with their colleagues. You know, this is the time when people are rotating in and out of post. So that's what most people are doing. And so it's just like, oh my goodness, I'm trying to pack up my house and I'm trying to, you know, work with people as well. It's really something shocking, you know. So I'm anticipating that some of the mentors may have to drop out. So I may have to shift people around. It depends. But I'll put a call out to the mentors again and just ask them if they are really committed, if they're able to help, if they need to back out, they let me know as soon as possible. So then we can make the adjustment on your side as well. That also, I'm going to ask if there are more mentors available, because I have more mentees than mentors. What I want to do is find out if so there are some people who didn't get matched, and so for whatever reason, and so I'm trying to find them some mentors as well. So I'll see what happens, right? So that's where that stands at the moment.
Can we be added to the list of mentees?
You can ask. You can send me an email. You can ask. Go ahead. Go ahead, Amal.
Yeah, so 2 questions, please, CJ. So one, what would be your recommendation or like good practice of how to prepare for these kinds of assessments? Aside from memorizing as many as keywords, do you have any suggestions of how to do it efficiently? And the second question, how can we get the best from our mentors? If you have any hints for us, thank you.
Okay, do you want to, shall we spend some time talking about mentors right now? Is that okay with everybody? You know, clap or raise your hand or something like that if you think that's what you should do right now. Yes. Okay. All right, very good. So I myself, I'm kind of guiding the mentors as well as the mentees. Some of them have done this process before, so they kind of know how it goes. I have to provide them with some documents because they haven't been paying attention to this process. I actually want to find out, are there any mentors on the line right now? I think there might be one or two. If you're a mentor and you're on the line, please identify yourself. Oh, maybe I'm imagining things, who knows? But in any event, so they're not as plugged in to this process at the moment because they simply haven't been exposed to some of the documents and whatnot that you have and that are available. So I'm going to be sharing with them some of the documents that I've been sharing with you so that they know, oh, okay, this is what the mentees are working with. So the idea behind mentorship is that this is your opportunity to ask for advice. It's your opportunity to practice, to practice how to craft your answers. This is both for the oral, because we talk a lot in these sessions about the oral section, because this platform is made for oral discussion. It would be useful for you to try to work with your mentor on written answers to some more challenging questions, to work with them to say, okay, give me a question, I'll write an answer as best I can from the perspective of this competency, and then we'll review it together and you can tell me how I can improve my writing or improve the structure, improve the flow. Does that make sense? And then any competency as well where you're a bit shaky, you can say, well, can we talk about how I give my answer? Can we talk about how I structure my answer? Okay, if you were the evaluator, what would that look like to you? How could I improve? What can I do better? So it's a question of first talking to your mentor and then saying, this is what I really want to focus on. Can we work on this together? And then to find out from them as well how much time they have, right? How much time do you have? Because if some mentors really have already said that their timing is very, very limited, so they say, look, I have 2 days I can work with you and that's it. But that's very rare. Most of them haven't said anything at all. So they're kind of at your disposal for whatever you want to work with them on. Yes? Does that make sense? Anyone know your mentor already? Worked with your mentor before? Well, and can talk to what the mentor relationship was like? So you can tell your colleagues who haven't been through it before. Okay, go for it. Who's done it before? Who wants to comment? Hey, somebody has to talk here. It's not just me.
In my experience, my mentors have been very supportive, but I had to ask the questions and get things warmed up and started. And then they became quite supportive. I think that approach does work well. So, for example, the mentor I have now, I've already been in touch with him, and he actually reached out to me. And so my plan is to put some questions forward to him and ask him about his experience and ask for some clarifications on some of the competencies, the ones that I'm having trouble kind of wrapping my head around. And that just warms up the conversation. And they may have sample questions as well that they have in mind that they can put forward.
Yeah.
And I've also been in touch this morning, and just to give context, I sent my CV. I sent the competencies that we're going to be tested on. I said my orientation is really to kind of understand life at Post, because I haven't been at Post thus far, and to kind of, as an FS-02, how I would navigate these what would you do if questions. And I posed a few hypothetical ones, and I think that was a good start just to kind of orientate our conversation.
Yeah. Anyone else who's gone through this, perhaps in the FS1, who's worked with a mentor in that environment? Amal, is your hand up from before, or is it up for right now? Do you want us to comment on this?
No, it was from before. Sorry.
Okay. Anyone else who's been through the mentorship process to please comment? Okay. So Fatma has asked a question saying, could we talk briefly about the types of questions we could be asked? Are these the same as the FS1 competition, but looked at with a more thorough analysis from the people evaluating us? That, I don't know, but I would anticipate that the questions, if you've been through the FS1 competition, then you have a pretty good idea of what's going to come up on the FS2. I would guess that they're not going to be that different in terms of the format. Of course, the questions themselves will be different. The format and the approach would certainly be pretty similar, right? So in this session, we're going to pull a sample question, and most likely one that you've seen from the FS1 competition, and we'll work through it here today. Okay, any other questions about mentorship? I know that there was still an outstanding question of how to prepare for these tests. I think maybe we'll leave that question for the end of this session. We can deal with a particular competency this time around, and then we can talk about, okay, some strategies for preparation. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yes, please.
Okay, so here I'm going to pull up a question that nicely is both in English and French. Let's see. This one I'm going to pull up is on influencing and alliance building. This is a competency we've not really touched on so far in these sessions, so I'm going to pull this one up. That's not the one I wanted. This one, because it's pretty broad, and it's also in the format of it's pretty broad. Pull it up here, and while I'm pulling this up, think who wants to be one of the people to tackle this particular question. I'll take out, as usual, a lot of these questions that we give you or that we pose to you can be answered from several different points of view. I want you to focus only on influencing and alliance building. Okay, so there, have a look in the chat, and you'll see the question is listed first in French, and the same question is listed in English as well. Those of you who are on the line, do you need me to read it out?
I have a question about the questions, and you have very good example questions. Do you have a stash of these questions somewhere, or are you pulling these questions from somewhere?
No, we make them up. It's myself and
well,
the other mentors.
You're brilliant then, CJ.
Yeah, we just make them up. So what's happened is that as different mentors are making up questions, that's what some of the mentors have done as well. They made up questions when they were working with their mentees, and they're generous enough to share them with the other mentors. And so I just started gathering them as well. So that's part of what I'm sharing with the broader group of mentors, to say, look, these are some questions that have been made up already. Please make up some of your own and share them. I'll make up some more and we'll share them. And then you can use them as much as or as little as you want. Okay, Julie, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. Would you mind reading the question? Simply because my screen, I don't see the question, or I don't see the documents on the board.
Okay, so I'm going to read the English version of the question, okay?
Thank you.
It's pretty short, so it's not too involved. Okay. Some people are in the lobby. Sorry, I'm just admitting them. Okay, so the question here, the competency is on influencing and alliance building. You have been tasked by your program manager to conduct some research on the key government, non-governmental, and private sector actors in a specific country. This research will help to support the advocacy strategy being developed by Canada's mission in the country. Explain what process you would use to undertake this task and how you would structure your research. Okay, so pretty short, yeah? But when it's short like this, it's deceptive. could be tricky. There may be some pitfalls there. All right. So this is where there are a couple of things that we normally talk about when we're looking at a question. When you get this question on your screen in VidCruiter, what will happen, of course, is that you'll see the question come up on the screen and it'll show you the competency that's being assessed at the top. And of course, the advice that I give is that you should read the question and jot down immediately everything, first of all, that you remember from the competency definition, because of course you haven't brought in any paper, so everything has to be in your head. So you have to jot down, okay, on influencing and alliance building, what are my keywords? What is it that an FS2 officer is expected to do overall? Okay, I need to jot that down. And then from the wording of the question, jot down the things that immediately leap out at you. The things that immediately say, oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to address that. You write those things down. You just make some bullet points. Note as well the question that you're being asked to answer, right? Then before you start crafting your answer, go back and read the question again. Go back and read it again. Read it slowly, read it carefully, read it out loud, read it to make sure that you really do understand what the question is. See if you can pick up any nuances in the question. Make sure you understand the question that's being asked. What are you being asked to answer, right? Remember that you are in this interview showing that you are a competent FS2 officer and that you exemplify this competency. Do not get caught up in the question to the extent that you think you're actually in the situation right now and you need to generate the report that it's asking for, right? Be careful. Understand what you're there to do. You're there to answer the question that's being asked. So that's what that second pass through the question is going to help you focus. Say, okay, this is how I'm going to answer the question. There are some questions. Since it's a recorded interview, says one question, are we not allowed to jot notes down before responding? Yes, what happens in VidCruiter, of course, is that when you say, yes, I want to go to the next question or the first question, what happens is you start the question appears on the screen and your countdown starts because you have 10 minutes to prepare yourself, right? You have 10 minutes to prepare your answer. Once those 10 minutes have elapsed, or once you tell the system that you're ready to start, your recorded section starts. And now you need to look into the camera and you need to deliver your answer. And you have 10 minutes and that's it for that. But you're not allowed to bring in any prepared material ahead of time. Make sense? Okay. So who has the competency? Who would like to review the competency for us, especially for those who can't access that dictionary? We're looking at influencing and alliance building. So go ahead. Okay, so who's going to tackle the question? I need some volunteers. Okay, perhaps we need a review here. In this session, I'm not the only one talking. You have to talk. So when I ask for volunteers, you got to put your hand up. Don't be shy. This is your chance. Because if you don't put your hand up, it means that you want your first practice to be when you're in the exam. Is that what you want? All right. Let's see. Who's going to tackle? Go ahead. Rasha and Cedric, will you both tackle?
Go ahead, Cedric. I can go after you. No worries.
Well, I was just going to say that I think I struggle a little bit at this point to understand how the question of influence and alliance building really links back to a research question. And I think you've cautioned about this where, my first instinct is to be like, all right, develop a plan, get various sources and so on. But we have to keep in mind that, the competencies influence and alliance building. With it, I would answer this question just to practice. I would actually divide the sub questions. So there's really two questions here: is how would you, what process would you use to undertake this task, which would be one question. The second question would be how I'd structure my research. And then I try to think about the different competencies. So here I think it's very important to talk about, for example, the different players, relationship building, and so on. So there's a few examples I could talk about. It'd be very important from the very beginning to build your alliances with, from the very start of your posting, to start building relationships with different program managers and whatnot, so that when this research is assigned to you, you're able to leverage those relationships to be able to get the information you need. And also building, establishing your credibility in the organization would be important in your reputation overall. It's kind of an incomplete answer. I'll let Rasha or others complete it, but I think my difficulty is we have a research question, but the competency is influence. So I'm very curious to see how others will do so.
Precisely so. Okay, Rasha, do you also want to tackle it?
Sure. Thanks so much again, CJ, for bringing us all together and having this sort of beehive think through. So I think with the research part, to me, that would mean going to networks to gather the information. And so I would approach it from reaching out to starting with colleagues at Mission and seeing, different program managers at the Mission, who they think are the different players on their files. Of course, talking to LES. I would then reach out to like-minded countries that we, share similar views or perspectives on a different issue, to see who are the key players from kind of their background and their perspective. So I would kind of structure it with different people to reach out to, first in kind of the inner circles, and then reaching out to folks that would have similar positioning as us. And then I'm trying to read the competency again, but I'll leave it there. But I would kind of see the research as really reaching out to my networks.
Excellent. Okay. So let's build on this then. What comments do people have on the line? And then we'll talk about how to structure your answer and how you can pull some of these ideas together. What comments do people have on the line on what you've heard so far?
I think I would say, what are my assumptions? I really liked when we've gone through questions in the past saying, what are my assumptions? So I would say, I've just recently arrived. I have, a 6-month timeline, and the advocacy strategy relates to clean tech, right? Like if I sort of, I think that would help me. And then I would sort of think about who I need to talk to internally, including locally engaged staff. Who is the clean tech, who's on the clean tech file in the locally engaged staff. I would, of course, look at previous initiatives that we've done around clean tech, who our partners were, basically getting a lay of the land in terms of what's been done before, and then speaking to key individuals internally around on the clean tech file. So I really have a sense of what we've done, what's been successful, who our key partners are, and then working outwards in thinking about other government partners, and then NGOs that are working in the clean tech sector. And then private sector actors could be Canadian companies working in clean tech in that country. So I'd kind of build out internally and then outwards, but again, getting a lay of the land, who are the key people internally, making sure I liaise with them, and then so you're not reinventing the wheel, and then working my way out. Yeah, leave it at that.
Very good. Sorry, I dropped out for a second. I had some technical difficulties on my end, so I'm sure this recording might seem a bit strange at the end. I think it reflects my experience here in the chat, but we'll see what happens. Amal and then Lukash, go ahead.
Yes, so I just wanted to bring in maybe one element we could maybe consider in the answer, and that could link more to the alliance building and maybe and influence, which is this research. The purpose of it is to support advocacy. So we do advocacy to build alliances and to influence policy in the in the countries we are working in. So I think we should start our thinking of an answer to this question, having that in mind. And so before starting, I think we should first start by asking ourselves, what are Canada's priorities in this area of research we're going to be working on? It could be clean tech or anything else. So we should know what are Canada's priorities in the specific country we are going to be building the advocacy campaign in. Then define our target audience. Who are the people that we want to influence to achieve what goals exactly? And then from there, you go out and gather your information. The information should be gathered at least in 2 different ways, but maybe 3 different ways. So you do your desk research, you go and meet people outside actors, inside actors, and then you could even you could contact the researchers within the country about that specific subject, and you could have meetings where you gather people from different walks of life to have discussions. So you have your 3 different sources of information: desk research, interviews, and discussion groups, and then you summarize, analyze, and give recommendations based on the initial work that you've done, which is looking for what's Canada's priorities in the subject and in the country, and voila.
All right, very good. I like these comments. Lukash and then Kadia.
Yes, so Lukash here. My question is, and actually it would sort of build upon what was already said today, but I also saw that the influence in alliance building as a strategic sort of objective in leveraging and using research that would help support the advocacy strategy. And my question is, would it be helpful or of value to include that strategic approach in determining, for example, what private sector, what non-governmental organizations already have been partnered with in that country, and then identifying partners that specifically share Canada's values, so linking it back to the departmental objectives, in order to leverage those as a way to influence. So, I mean, to break it down more simply, would it be of value to include like some partners and organizations locally that Canada would be able to leverage in order to get something across?
So many questions for such a short question. This is great. I'm coming to you. I'm just letting you all discuss, because you can see how you can really spin out quite a lot out of something that's pretty short. Yes, Kadia, go ahead, and then we're going to talk about the competency and how to structure a potential answer. Go ahead.
Oui, merci. Je vais le faire en français.
Oui.
En fait, dans cette question, étant donné que on nous demande de faire des recherches, je peux présumer d'abord que je pourrais être dans un pays en développement, un pays où il y a des acteurs gouvernementaux qui jouent un rôle très important. Il y a des acteurs du secteur privé et il y a des organisations non gouvernementales qui peuvent aider dans ce processus de recherche. Donc, je pense que je vais d'abord essayer de voir quels sont les acteurs qui travaillent avec le gouvernement du Canada dans ce pays, soit les organisations, les ONG qui travaillent avec le Canada, que le Canada a l'habitude de travailler, et aussi dans le secteur privé avec le secteur du commerce. Quelles sont les organisations déjà qui sont en contact et qui ont établi des relations, des réseaux avec les diplomates canadiens qui sont dans ce pays même. Donc, une fois que j'ai toutes ces informations, je peux contacter mes collègues du commerce et que je suppose que moi, je travaille, par exemple, dans le secteur consulaire. Je vais essayer de contacter mes collègues du secteur du commerce et mes collègues du secteur de la section politique et voir quels sont les réseaux qu'ils ont développés avec tous ces acteurs qui ont été nommés ici. Une fois que j'aurai des informations sur ces acteurs, je pourrais aussi voir si les autres missions diplomatiques du pays avec qui nous travaillons, je peux nommer les 5 yeux, les 5 eyes, pour voir eux aussi s'ils ont des contacts dans ce domaine-là qui pourront m'aider lorsque j'aurai toutes les informations pour appuyer la mise en place d'une stratégie de sensibilisation pour la mission. C'est sûr, je ne vais pas être là pour mettre en place la stratégie, mais mes recherches pourront aider pour mettre en place cette stratégie qui est importante pour le Canada et pour la mission. Donc, quand j'aurai toutes ces informations-là, je pourrai les préparer pour mon gestionnaire puisse les utiliser pour aller au niveau soit de la mission de l'ambassadeur ou bien au niveau de la centrale pour discuter de comment, avec toutes ces informations, comment on peut développer une stratégie de sensibilisation. Donc, le plus important ici, c'est d'utiliser les différents acteurs, d'utiliser nos réseaux, d'utiliser les relations qu'on a développées avec tous les secteurs dans ce domaine-là pour apporter l'information nécessaire pour pouvoir l'utiliser. Voilà plus ou moins une partie qui pourrait bien se faire. Merci.
Thank you very much. Excellent. All right. So you've all touched on and brought out excellent points. We're going to talk now about how to structure an answer to this particular question. And the best thing to do, let's go back and read the question again. So let's go slowly. First things first. It says you have been tasked by your program manager. So what's the first piece of information you have? You are not the program manager, right? It means you report to this person because they've tasked you with something, yes? So you're junior to the program manager. Second thing, you've been tasked by your program manager to conduct some research. What research? Doesn't say. On the key government, non-government, and private sector actors in a specific country. My question to you, where are you? Where are you?
Can we pretend to be somewhere specific?
This is the thing. Well, if you pretend to be somewhere specific, you may run the risk of getting too bogged down in the details of the specific question because your evaluator doesn't have that country on their sheet, right? The evaluator
Say abroad.
right? So you can say if you're abroad, but does it say that you're abroad? Normally,
I'm in a developing country.
Normally, the phrase program manager does suggest that you might be abroad, but notice the question doesn't say so. For all you know, maybe somebody has said program manager and they mean that you're actually working in Canada. It doesn't say that you're in the country itself. And even if you're at post, it doesn't say that you are actually researching information on a country in which you live. It doesn't say that, right? What does it say? It says in a specific country. It doesn't say where you are on posting. Do you see? Because there are a number of posts that cover multiple countries. Do you see? I'm just pointing this out because when you go carefully and slowly through the question, you realize how many gaps of information there are. And that is really typical of some of these questions that are going to be posed to you. There's going to be lots of things that are unsaid. And you will have to fill in those gaps, or you'll have to say, well, you know, that looks like a red herring, I'm going to ignore that. Or you're going to fill in the information yourself with assumptions that are going to help you answer the question. Do you see? Okay, keep going. Let's read the question again. Keep going in the question. This research, what research? The research that you are pulling together. What research? It's on key government, non-governmental, and private sector actors. What exactly that research is unsaid. What is it that you're supposed to be pulling up about these people or about these organizations? It doesn't say, right? Nonetheless, this research that you're going to be pulling together will help to support the advocacy strategy being developed by Canada's mission in the country. So Canada has a mission in whatever country it is, country X, and they are developing an advocacy strategy. Advocacy on what issue? It doesn't say. Advocacy from what perspective? It doesn't say. Most Canadian missions have multiple programs that are represented. You have development program, the trade program, the political program, the immigration program. You could have public safety. You could have the RCMP. You could have different provinces being represented in the mission. You can have a lot of people at a mission, a lot of different perspectives in a mission. So who is actually being involved in this advocacy strategy? It doesn't say, right? Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, no, as we reread the question, I'm wondering if we should tackle the question from the perspective of like, you know, leveraging the the relationships I have built in my position. So relationships we have, and not only me but like the team, my program manager, the division, etc. Like leveraging that relationship with key stakeholders to undertake the research and gather the information we need. Would that
let's
be
go slowly? Well, let's go slowly now. We're going to come to it. Hold on a second. Because what we're going to do is finish reading the question and then we're going to go back and read it again. Yes? So let's continue. Explain what process you would use to undertake this task and how you would structure your research. What process you would use and how you would structure your research, right? So what are you going to do to make this research come together? And then once you've done all this research, how are you going to present it? Like, how are you going to outline it? Because it's supposed to be used for this advocacy strategy, right? That's the question that you're being asked. What would you do? What steps would you take? What process would you use to gather the information required? And how are you going to put it all together? Make sense? Let's go back and read the question again. You've been tasked by your program manager to conduct some research on the key government, non-governmental, and private sector actors in a specific country. Did you catch that nuance the first time around? The key government, non-governmental, and private sector actors in a specific country. So what does that mean? It's not all of them, right? It's only a few, the key ones, the ones that are the most important. So how are you going to identify which ones are the most important before you do your research on them, right? Because you're not going to research all and then present everything, every governmental actor, every non-governmental body, every private sector actor. No, you're looking for the key ones. That's what the question says, right? In a specific country. Again, you have to come up with, well, what is this country in relation to what? Am I in that country? Is it a neighboring country? Like, what country is this? The research will help to support the advocacy strategy being developed by Canada's mission in the country. So, depending on what assumptions you put into the question, this advocacy strategy, you are one part of it, right? You are helping to develop it. So you may be at post, let's say, and you may be in a particular stream, but your program manager has tasked you with gathering this information. Why? Because your program manager is going to feed into the advocacy strategy. So this suggests to me that the advocacy strategy is broader than just your program, right? So if the advocacy strategy, the issue is broader than just your program, you need to think about, okay, well, how do I identify the key players and how do I structure the research so that not only my program can use the information, but everybody else can too. And the advocacy strategy now makes sense, right? Whole of mission perspective. Do you see? That makes sense? Do you see how we're going through the question and just really looking at the question and seeing what it means? You understand?
Yes.
Okay. So now you've read through the question You've jotted down your best answers, the things that, jump into mind. And that was all of your discussion that you had just now. All of the things that came to mind, that's good stuff, but that's not an answer. Those are responses. Those are things that you want to make sure to include, but that's not an answer. An answer requires structure, and the answer requires reference to the competency, right? So now we're going to look at the competency, and we're going to make sure that we really understand that when we answer this question, we answer from the perspective of competency. So if you have it, I think Rasha posted it up inside the chat as well. We're going to look at it now. So click on it, open it, have a look. So I'm just going to read on the English version. Here's the idea. Employees at Global Affairs Canada identify shared interests, both nationally and internationally, and cultivate them to persuade others. They know whose interests are at play and leverage those interests in Canada's favor. They think things through from the perspective of others and anticipate what they may need to support a position or accomplish a goal. They reach out to people and partners who could be of value to Canada regarding issues, both country-specific and global. They establish networks to gather insights and expand their sphere of influence. They collaborate with players who are diverse and dissimilar from themselves, including countries, non-governmental organizations, private sector, and cultural communities. The column 1 says identifies key players in different areas of interests, illustrates the importance of growing a network of contacts, reaches out and makes connections beyond their own network. Column 2 says differentiates the variety of players involved in an alliance, how they're linked and the dynamics among them, engages in alliance building in moderately challenging situations, seeks out and establishes relationships and networks with others whose expertise assists in meeting immediate objectives in own area, helps others in urgent situations, builds relationships with all levels and colleagues in different communities of practice, example, trade, international development, shares networks to help the team strengthen the impact of a Global Affairs Canada initiative, articulates common interests, and articulates common interests, and I lost my page, but you can see for yourself that this is the end of that particular competency in any event. You see as well then how this competency, thank you, exercises a range of negotiation skills. Thank you so much. Okay, so do you see what that means? This competency is all about, okay, who do you know? Who do you know? Do you know how to reach out to the right people at the right time? Develop a relationship with them for the benefit of Canada, for the benefit of your colleagues, for the benefit of your program. Do you see? That's influencing and alliance building. And sometimes you need to go beyond just establishing the network. Sometimes you're trying to advocate. But this question doesn't ask you to advocate. It asks you to help do research that's going to contribute to an advocacy plan. So what they're going to do is take some of your research and it's going to help whoever's using it to start advocating, right? So here, this question is forcing you to focus more on the networking pieces, right? Identifying the right person, getting the right information, knowing who the right players are. That's what this question is asking about. Is that clear? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So now we talk about structuring your answer, and we'll talk about the assumptions that you want to make up off the top. So notice this question is short, and the short ones are tricky because they leave a lot out, as we've seen, as we've gone through the question a couple of times. So again, what we've always suggested you do is that you assume things that are going to make your life easy. Assume things that is going to make it easy for you to answer the question, right? So if you have experience in a particular stream, guess what? You're working in that stream right now. The question does not say that you're at post. You're going to assume that you are, because the question says, I'm reporting to a program manager, therefore I assume that I'm at post and that I'm in the country that is the subject matter of the research. I'm going to assume that. I'm not going to assume that it's a country, 2 countries over. It's the country that I'm in, right? Further, I'm going to assume that I have a number of other colleagues at the mission. There are a number of other programs that are also in the mission, and I'm going to assume that this is a whole of mission exercise. So it's not just me and one other program that are working on this one advocacy strategy. I'm going to assume it's everybody. It's all hands on deck. It's a broad issue that everybody's involved in, right? Absolutely. We're going to talk about the STAR format in a second. I'm just talking to you about how you would fill in some of the gaps for yourself right off the top. So again, we've talked before in other sessions about the STAR format of answering questions. Who has not heard that term and does not really know how it works? Put your hand up and we'll discuss it right now because we're going to apply it. So if you don't know what it is, let me know right now. Perfect. Excellent. It's always good to know when people haven't heard it because it's something that sometimes people assume that you've heard of it before, and if you haven't, this is the time to this is the type of session in which you can really dig into it. So, STAR format. Who wants to define for us?
Sorry, I know what it is. I just raised mine by mistake.
And tell us what it is. Go ahead.
Situation, task, a action, result, something like that, if I recall properly.
Yes, you have. Excellent.
CJ, I heard about STAR Plus. There is a plus that's
yes,
being added.
Absolutely.
Yes.
There's some.
So,
So sometimes people will add another R to talk about the results at the end. So we have the results and then the reflections at the end. So you reflect on those results, the reflection overall. Right. And some people will add another A, which is where you talk about your assumptions off the top before you start answering the question. Okay? So the idea is that you need to be able to articulate to the evaluator that you understand the situation in which you find yourself in this question. You say, okay, this is it. Okay, so the question is asking me. I'm an FS-02, I'm presuming, or I'm assuming that I'm an FS-02 officer at Post. The question is telling me that I have a program manager to whom I report and that I've been tasked with coming up with research on these key players. And I'm going to assume that I'm at a large mission with lots of colleagues in different programs, and that this research is a whole of mission exercise. So we're all going to be participating. So there will be counterparts to myself in each one of the programs. So I'm not the only junior person here who's been tasked. I'm going to assume that this tasking is going around the entire mission, right? You assume things that are going to help you. So furthermore, I'm going to assume that we are in the country that we're studying. So all of the players are actually available to us if we wanted to reach out to them and if we wanted to get information about them, they're right in country. And furthermore, I'm going to assume that we have, say, 6 months to conduct this research, right? You can assume a timeline because remember, the question doesn't say how long you have, right? Make sense? So these are the kinds of things you might assume right off the top. And so you explain that you understand where you are. My task is to provide research on key players, key government players, key non-governmental organization players, and key private sector actors, right? So not everybody in the world in which I find myself, but just the most important ones. And what I understand from this question, that the level of importance has to do with our ability then to build alliances with these people in order to advocate Canada's interests or to influence them in order to advance Canada's interests. That's my understanding based on how this question is structured. So the question asks me, how would I go about structuring my research? And it asks me what process I would use to conduct that research. So I'm going to answer those two things one at a time. So first, what process would I use to conduct my research? Well, I'm going to assume for the purposes of this question that I've been at Post for 2 years already, and I have a good sense of who some of the players are. Or I'm going to assume that I'm brand new at Post. I've just arrived and I don't really have a sense, but I have some information in my predecessor's handover notes. So what I would do first is look within the mission first to gather information about how to identify the key players. And then once I've gathered information from within the mission, I would then work with my program manager to develop an outcall program to go and speak with some of the key players and some of the key organizations in order to get a good sense of who the key players are in each of these 3 areas, right? So first, my work within the mission, I look into my predecessor's handover notes and I read through what my predecessor says are the most important. I read some of the reports that are already existing about this advocacy issue that we already have on file. I would call a meeting of my colleagues, my junior colleagues who have all been tasked with this same research. And I would say, why don't we all work together? And we are going to leverage each other's understanding and of what this advocacy project is all about, so that we make sure that we are identifying common key players from the perspective of our different programs. So I would use the resources within the mission as much as possible. Then I would talk to my program manager, make sure I'm on the right track. And in order to conduct research that my program manager expects to see, I would work with my program manager to say, well, who can I contact outside of the mission? Can I sit with some of these people and talk to them? Or if I can't sit with the main person, can I sit with somebody else in their organization? So on the governmental level, do we have a counterpart with whom we talk all the time? When it comes to private sector actors, can we reach out to them and go and talk to them? Do they have publicly available statements where we can read things that they've said publicly on the advocacy issue? When it comes to non-governmental organizations, do they have stated positions that we can pull and we can understand who are the main people involved in this issue and what they've said before? This is the kind of process that I would use to try to make sure I have a good understanding of the issue and who the people are who are key in terms of Canada's future advocacy strategy. But in terms of my process, I would start internally and then move externally. Then the question also asked me how I would structure my research. Well, I'm presuming at this point that I would actually have quite a lot of information on a lot of key players, people that I've identified as being key, that I've tested with my program manager, and my program manager has agreed with me that they seem to be the most important. One thing as well that I would try to do is perhaps reach out to like-minded countries, my own counterparts in like-minded missions that are also in the country, and just ask them, who are the key players here in the government on this issue? Who are the key players in the non-governmental sphere? Who are the key players in the private sector? And I would test their responses against the research that I have. Then what I might do is work with my program manager again to design research that's going to flow very well with the other program managers, right? To make sure that what we put together flows very well so that the head of mission can make decisions on how exactly to launch our advocacy strategy. So how would I structure that response? What I think I would do is separate my research into the 3 segments that my program manager assigned to me. My program manager assigned me non-governmental actors, governmental actors, and private sector actors. And what I would do is have those 3 sections, and I would list the people that are most important, from most important to least important, according to the research that I've done, and I would explain who they are and why they're important, and why I think they would be the most key, the person with the most influence, the person that we want to cultivate the best relationship with. That is how I would structure my response, because in order for us to use this research, my program manager needs to know who is more important than somebody else, who has more influence than someone else. And also I would make sure to include a section that includes ties between different people. If there's some personal relationship, for instance, between a non-governmental actor and somebody in the private sector on this issue, I would highlight those connections for my program manager and also my head of mission, so that they could keep that connection in mind, so that they could leverage it when they're implementing Canada's advocacy strategy. So that is how I would approach doing this research. That is how I would structure this research. And that is what I would present to my program manager. Do you see?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. Any comments there or questions on like how that happened, how that came together? Did you see the structure, the situation, the task, the actions as well, how it's all linked together to the competency? It's linked to the question. You have to provide your evaluator with enough guidance through your answer so that they don't get lost themselves in the details of what you're presenting, right? And you'll notice that I didn't mention what section of the mission I was in, because I didn't find it important for the purposes of this session to do that. If you want to talk about what section you're in, that's perfectly fine. If you want to talk about weave in some example from your own life, that's also fine, but don't get off track. Make sure that if you're going to do that, that you pull in the example and you go right back to your structure, answering the question and focusing on the competency from which you're answering. Yes? That makes sense. Natalie, is your hand up for now or was it up from before?
So that was beautiful. The Oracle has spoken, very much appreciated on that one. Just trying to bring it like full circle here. If we're talking about reflection, as I think a number of folks have mentioned lessons learned, like how, given that this is a, I don't want to say fabricated scenario, but a hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
How kind of tie that together?
You normally wouldn't in a hypothetical, right? Because they're giving you the situation. Normally, if you were going to reflect on something, let's say this is the example, and let's say you were in exactly this situation, right? Let's say, okay, so you're talking about how you would reach out to colleagues and you reach out to these people and you're talking to people to try to figure out, who are the key players. And you would say, when I was at Post, in X country, I had a very similar task and I did those steps and they were effective. But on reflection, what I would have done to strengthen even the research that I presented in that case would have been to talk to this group of people as well, because they also had unique perspectives that could have helped refine Canada's advocacy program at the end of the day. So because I had that experience in real life, in this example, I would make sure to go and reach out to that group of people as well. Let's say it's academics. I would make sure to go and reach out to academics as well, who could provide me with more context that would allow me to evaluate the relationships between some of the key players that I'm identifying, right? Something like that. That's how you do it.
So we won't address the research. I totally get that we're on about alliances, but the research, so the whole that's the one that can throw you off into a lot.
Exactly. So, because what's the question? What's the question? It doesn't say what would your research be. You're not there to draft a research plan. It asks you what's your process, and it asks you how would you structure it. That's it. It doesn't ask you for the research. Okay.
I'm totally outcomes focused, so I would research. Okay, got it.
Now I'm going to talk a bit though, if you end up with a bit of time at the end, right? We can talk about that in a second, but there are some questions as well. Go ahead, Tira, and then Lamia.
Hi there. I don't know. Thanks so much, CJ. I'm not sure if this has already been covered in the discussion, but you know how there's like so for this FS-02 competition, are we just covering the competencies or the indicators that just go up to immediate or intermediate? Sorry, because there's 4 columns. There's entry, intermediate, expert, and manager.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we to assume that cover up to intermediate and including entry?
Yeah, at least up 1 and 2. Normally, you wouldn't be trying to demonstrate that you're the competency at the manager level because that's not the FS-02 level, right?
Okay, thank you for
at least the second column, and have a look at that 3rd column as well, just to be on the safe side, right?
Thank you.
Okay, Lamia was next, and then Maria.
Thank you, CJ. I just had a couple of questions, if I may. First of all, are you able to, in this chat group, put the video links for the last two sessions. I missed them. So if I could just watch the YouTube, and that would be solid. The other question I have is, I don't know if anyone knows whether HSOP has indicated which competency will be tested at the interview stage, and then which competency, unless someone's covered this already, I can't find that information. And I think it really helps us prepare, well, actually how to prepare for the interview versus the exam.
Yeah, it's the ones that are listed above ability to communicate orally are going to be tested orally. The ones that are listed above ability to communicate in writing will be tested in writing.
Ah, that's very sensitive then. Thank you, CJ.
Well, I read it through and I said, hey, why have they put these two abilities in separate locations in your list? I said, that's what's going on there. You still have to think how they think, you know?
And then the final question, if I may. So on the STAR, the final R or the A, the reflections or just the awareness, how do we sort of present those in a way in which we don't kind of add, like defeat ourselves, basically, right? So like we're reflecting, yes, we've done this in the past, this is what I would do, this I could do better, I guess would be the language we use. But I find those a little bit tricky because you're trying to say, aha, I've done this, but I could have done this better. And then the examiner is like, oh, okay, so you're not the best.
Or you could reflect and say that it was, you knocked it out of the park. It was fantastic.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
that could be your reflection. It would work like a charm. I would copy it exactly.
Okay, cool.
Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you. I just have a question. When you were talking about how to structure the research, and you were saying, divide the stakeholders by non-government, government, private sector, and least in the most important area. But to me, I obviously, like, I'm so new at this. I feel like this is kind of like a result of the research. And if the question is how you would structure your research, I don't know. I'm a bit confused by that part. How would you structure your research? I thought that the first part that you explained answers that as well. Because, but I don't know. I feel like these other, isn't it that the result? I mean, I think the research is what you explained. Like, okay, first I'm gonna see, who are like kind of are like-minded, or like what do we have internally at mission, knowledge that we can share amongst ourselves, blah, blah, blah. That is kind to me on how I structured the research. I might be wrong. I don't know.
Well, you can structure your research however you want. I just picked that because I thought it was easiest, right? But with the question, it depends if you get a question like this, if you get a wording like this, which you might not. That's kind of some tricky wording that, yes? So I'm not surprised that you find it a bit confusing because I think it's designed that way. I didn't write this particular question. I'll just let you know. But when they ask you about process, they're asking you what steps you're going to take to gather the information that you need. And like those of us who, you've been through writing a thesis or doing a big research project, what happens? You go and you read all this stuff, you get articles from this journal, you go and you read this book, you attend that lecture, and you have all this information, right? Now, how are you going to put it together in a way that makes sense? Because the person that you're presenting it to, they're not going to read all of that. They need you to structure it in such a way that they can quickly go through it and it's useful to them to know what the bottom line is. That's what's meant by that question. How do you structure it? How are you going to present it to your interlocutor, to the person who needs it? How are you going to present it to your program manager in this scenario? How are you going to present it to your head of mission? Who's going to find it useful, right? So some of it, I could have answered that a different way. I could have said, okay, so now that I've gotten all this information, what I would do is ask my program manager if we could work together to present a common document, between all of the junior officers in different programs at Mission. And I would work with my colleagues to present my points of view from the perspective of my program, something of that nature, right? But again, it's how is it that you're going to present the information that you have? The process is telling you what steps you're going to take to gather the information. Now you've got all this stuff. How are you going to structure it? How are you going to make it really something that your program manager and your head of mission can read and understand.
CJ, I have a question.
Sure.
How deep would you go? So you've got your 3 lists, and we've kind of agreed that the whole mission is working on it. Would you try to extract the history? Like, we've worked with these NGOs for this particular program in 2017. We worked with, would you try to sort of outline the history of our engagement with all of these as part of our list, for example, so that everyone understands? Okay, so you try to do as deep a dive as possible.
It depends on what you decide the structure should be, right? If you think that the structure would be really useful to say, I'm going to structure it in 2 parts. I'm going to say this is our historical relationship and this is with the current events, right? That's how I would structure it, because I want my head of mission to have a good sense of what the history has been on this issue. And so I'm going to provide an overall background of what we've done in the past, who has been important, why certain things are the way they are in country, why certain advocacy lines have worked and why they failed, and why some people are important and why not. That's going to be the background section. So my head of mission has that. And then I'm going to present the rest of my research in terms of these are the most important people right now. These are the power players and why they're so important. But then my head of mission has to read both parts to understand the background and the history, but also the current events. Who are the main players? Who are the decision makers? That's the other thing. You can say, I'll divide it up. These people are the decision makers and these people are the influencers, right? That's another way to organize your research if you're looking at key people, right? Depends how you want to do it. But they're not looking for the particular answer. They're looking for how you think it through. They're looking for how you understand how to build a profile, how to build up a network, and why certain things are important and why some things aren't. That's what they're looking for, that you are good at that. You're good at that kind of thinking through.
Right. And there may be some NGOs that are controversial with the local government or what have you. Yeah.
Exactly. So. Yeah. Go ahead, Lamia. Lamia, did you have your hand up from before or do you have your hand up now?
Sorry, I was on mute. No, that's from before. I'm gonna take that off. Sorry, my bad.
No problem. Okay. So let's say that you answer this question and you have some time left at the end. If you answer the question, you have time left at the end, you are perfectly entitled to make note of that to your evaluator. To say, okay, well, that's overall how I would answer this question. I see that I have 3 minutes left. I'd like to take some time now then to just review the question and review my notes so that I make sure that I really provide a fulsome answer to you. I'll just take some time right now. And you do that. You say it out loud. You let your evaluator know and you read your notes and you read the question. And if you find that there's some nuance that you'd like to add, you go on ahead and you add it. You'll say, okay, just to flesh out that part on the process, I would like to add that I would also do this, this, and this. And just to talk about structure, I've already said that I would structure it in these 3 parts. But what I would say is that one thing that would be important to highlight would be to add a background section, for my head of mission as well. And I would include things like people's biographies. I would include things like their pictures. I would include a little précis on different interactions that we've had in, say, the last 5 years with those people, just so that my head of mission and my program manager have a good sense of the interactions we've had with them so far. I would include another section to see if there are any tensions between these key players and any of our like-minded colleagues, because what we want to do in country, of course, is advocate Canada's position. And in order to do that, we need to have our like-mindeds on side. So if there are any tensions between the key players and our like-mindeds, that would be important to highlight for my head of mission. So I would include that section as well in my research, something of that nature. So that's what you do with your time. That's how you manage your time through.
I like that piece at the end when if we have extra time. That's very, very good good tip. Thank you.
Exactly. So sometimes the time will fly, and what I would suggest to you is, okay, we were going to talk. That was a question that was earlier on. It's how do you practice and how do you, structure your answers. What I would suggest is that if you have practice questions like this, particularly if you and your mentor can come up with some questions, or if you can use some of these same questions that have come up in these sessions, you're going to want to practice crafting an answer and delivering that answer within the 10 minutes. As a matter of fact, what you want to do is try to deliver it in a shorter period of time. Aim for delivering your answer within, say, 7 minutes or 8 minutes to just give yourself a bit of buffer. Because you can always, if you end up with extra time at the end, you can always stop, reread the question, reread your notes, add something else that comes to mind. There's no problem with this, right? But you want to practice understanding how long that 10-minute window is. Because if you don't, you're not going to be able to manage your time that well when it comes to the actual exam. So practice that 10-minute window ahead of time. Go ahead, Maria.
Sorry, I'm asking many questions, but taking advantage, as you say. In terms of like, how do we split the time to do all of these steps, right? Because we have to read the question, we have to write down our first thoughts, then reread the question again, and then like all of what you're saying, we should aim to answer the question in less than, to have some buffer time at the end. What is your recommendation on how much time spent on each step?
Well, all of your preparation, you have 10 minutes. And for answering the question, you have 10 minutes. That's it. It's the system that gives you that amount of time. That's how much time you have. Sorry. Seems a bit abrupt, but that's how it is.
Noted.
HR sent the definitions. Excellent. Can you share? Go ahead, Cedric. Can you post them? Is it possible, or is the document quite large?
No, for sure. Sorry, it's on my personal email. Let me just pull it up here on my work computer and share. But I think everyone should have received. I didn't ask, so I imagine we've all received this email.
Yeah.
Let me share it.
Because again, they have to give it to everybody who's in the session. Like they cannot have some people get it and other people not. It doesn't make sense. So what we'll do in future sessions is we'll work exclusively from the definitions that HR is providing. The competency dictionary notwithstanding, work from the definitions that they provided, because that's what's being tested. And that's what your evaluator is going to be looking at. Okay, so is it only in French? I would imagine that you're getting the definition in the language that you told VidCruiter or told HR you wanted to communicate.
It's
it's bilingual.
French and English.
Did you get both?
It looks like French is first, but then English is afterwards. So
it's both. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah.
I have a quick question while people are pulling that up. Why would HR be encouraging us to do the interview part first as opposed to the exam?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
For clarity, do we have to do the interview part first, or is it just suggested?
Yes.
No, they tell you that it's a requirement, that if you start the process, that you must do the interview section first, but you do not have to proceed with doing the writing section immediately. You can come back another day if you want, anytime before July 7th, and do the writing portion.
So it's interesting to note that they just provided the one that we read, the overview of each competency, but they didn't do number 2, right? Like they didn't sort of do the drill down, but I'm sure it's helpful for us anyway to sort of review.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever's in there, that's what you're pulling from in order to answer your question. Yeah. Oh, I can't share. Well, you can send it by email.
Well, you shared it in the beginning. It's the same competencies that you shared in the beginning of the session in the chat.
But then what about the ones that aren't listed in the competency dictionary?
Like the results orientation one?
Yeah.
It's included in the new document it just sent us.
Exactly.
I think I can upload it. I'll
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's the GAC ones?
It's the ones that have been sent to you.
We've all been sent the same document.
Yeah.
I have another question. Sorry, CJ. I had my hand raised. Sorry. So on the knowledge part, I mean, I guess we'll get to it, but just am I getting ahead if I ask that question now?
No, go ahead.
So they specified GAC priorities,
Yeah.
2020 to 21.
Yes.
And this is like driving me nuts because we have a new departmental plan. I know it has not been implemented.
Right.
And then you have like 2 mandate letters and a speech from the throne. But what about the corporate plan? Are we looking at that too or not? No. So we don't even look at it. Just
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at the departmental plan, mandate letter. That's it. Speech from the throne.
No, it doesn't even say speech from the throne or mandate letter. It says the departmental plan. That's what it says.
Really? So
That's
like
what it is.
But in the past, we've always referred to it, no brownie points for that.
Well, your evaluator is going to be looking at, the elements that they need to check. Like they're checking off a certain number of things, right? There's some suggested answers on their sheet, and their sheet is going to be tied to whatever the competency is or whatever that element is that's in the definition. If you start saying other stuff, guess what? That's not on their sheet. It doesn't allow them to check in. Right?
Okay.
So, and imagine the time that you spend talking about the speech from the throne, you're not talking about the departmental plan.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. And is it okay for us to look off our notes and talk when we're doing the interview? Not a problem.
As far as I understand, the only notes that you're allowed to have are the ones that you prepare then. So
Okay.
if you have if you show that you've printed off, 10 pages and you have that and you're reading off that, that's going to be a big clue that you brought in material that you weren't supposed to bring. But if you have material that you have prepared during, and you're just saying, look, I'm just referring to the notes that I made during the 10-minute preparation time, then that should be fine. But
So I can
again,
actually hold up one piece of paper and say, these are my notes from my prep. We'll be referring to them. No problem.
Well, sure. It depends how you do it. I mean, if you look strange,
It may look bad.
don't look like a weirdo, like.
Sorry, I'm a bot now, just presenting what I prepared in 10 minutes.
Exactly. So, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, yes, thank you, CJ. So just to check my understanding, since HR only sent the top heading and not the columns 1, 2, 3, 4, that means if we try to incorporate wordings within, say, column 2, do we get any point or brownie point, or just wanted to check?
It means that they think that the top definition is enough, right?
Oh,
it means the top definition, the wording there is enough for you to answer the question. And then I'll give you any more help other than that.
Okay, so probably no bonus point, but good to have anyway.
Because remember, people who are outside the department don't have access to that chart, right? They don't have access to like more explanation as to what that means. So in order for it to be on the same footing, it's that definition that's at the top that they've given you. That's what you're working with. Right?
All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem. Any other questions right now? I know this is exciting to have those definitions finally. Any questions or comments? Okay. So now you have a sense of how influence and alliance building works. That was for a research project. Sometimes a question on influencing and alliance building would include, okay, you actually have to go out and do this work, and they'll give you a bit more information. And essentially, you confine yourself to the parameters of the question. Whatever the question is, that's what you answer, right? So be clear, read the question, read it again, understand what's being asked of you, and then you answer the specific question that's being asked. If you end up with extra time, you can always talk about more stuff. You can always throw more things in, that's fine. But make sure at a minimum that you answer the question that's being asked, and that you do so making reference to the competency that's right at the top of the page. There most likely is going to be at least one question where they're asking you to respond to a situation from more than one competency's perspective, right? So that means that the question will be structured in such a way that you can do that, right? So you're going to have to be really judicious in how you weave your way through those kinds of answers. So as we go in some of these sessions, we're going to cover a couple of examples where it's multiple competencies being asked about and how you would structure your answers that way. Make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Anything else to talk about? We're past the time.
CJ, would you recommend that we tune in to other sessions with you, or is going to be the same, just repeated for other people to benefit?
No, they're always different. Sometimes the topic is the same, the competency is the same, but the discussion always goes in different directions, right? So jump into whatever you'd like. You know, it depends on you.
They've all been incredibly helpful, CJ. I think this is my third. It's excellent. I haven't been able to stay for the whole thing, but they're all incredibly useful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
are you
and
going
then-
to put the
yes,
links for the recordings?
Yes, I'm going to do that right now, actually, because I did
Thank
send
you
them.
so much.
I have them here. Hold on. Let's go here. I have to just look in my own sent mail, and then I can post those.
CJ, do you think that they might ask us to write a briefing note? Like, should we prepare?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm always thinking about, well, how does this work from the perspective of somebody who's outside the department, right?
Right.
Would they also be able to write a briefing note? And I'm not sure, or a meeting note. I'm not sure that would be something reasonable to ask. So certainly you're going to have to write something. And again, we know what you're going to have to write about. It's going to be something about knowledge of the department. It's going to be something on, you know, analytical thinking and whatnot, right?
Right.
The ones.
45 minutes. 45 minutes is a long period of time, times 2. So it's hard to even take a guess as to what the questions might be for the written component. It just seems quite long, 90 minutes for 2 questions. But
yeah, especially if we don't have access to the internet or they're not asking us for research, like.
Yes, if they ask us to do a briefing note, do you think we should use the template?
What template would you think of in that case if they ask you?
For example, the template that available in the intranet to do briefing note or memo.
But the thing is that if you're asked to do a briefing note, they would have to provide you a template of some kind, because there are people who are outside the department who've never seen what our briefing notes look like. And they're in the competition too. So they have to be able, it has to be fair for them. And besides which, so you don't have any access to any template unless you're remembering what a briefing note looks like. Of course, you can arrange your answer in that format from what you remember, but aside from that, you know, they would have to either give you a template or they would have to ask a totally different question. I would imagine they would ask a totally different question. I'd imagine that wouldn't be it. I don't know. I didn't draft it, so I don't know. I would imagine that they would probably say, look at some of the departmental priorities, and they'd say, you know, which 2 would you think are the most important and why, and how would you work with those priorities or whatever. You know, if you were at Post, or, you know, how would you design something? Who would you talk to? Something like that.
Can we tackle that next session or one of the remaining sessions?
Yeah, we're going to look at some of the writing sections. Go ahead, Amal.
Thank you, CJ. So for this question of briefing note, I had this conversation with colleagues who did the FSIA process, and we didn't come to an agreement. So for me, the question was not to write a briefing note, but to explain how will you write a briefing note. It's as you mentioned now about the structure of your research. It's more about talking about how you apply your analytical skills to structure your briefing note, and not necessarily to write the actual one. But some of my colleagues were adamant, no, the question was to write a briefing note. So anyway, yeah.
But again, that I don't know what the wording was of the question, but that's where the answer lies. The answer lies in the wording of the question. So what did the question say? Did it say write a briefing note?
Not at all. That was my point. No, it wasn't. Yeah. It was explain how would you structure your briefing note.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah.
So again, in your answer, you would say, you know, if you want to be really clear, you would say, I see from the wording of the question that you are asking me how I would structure this briefing note. I take from this that you're not asking me to actually prepare a briefing note, but rather you want to know what sections I would put in my briefing note. Therefore, I am going to tell you the sections that I would use, and they are as follows.
Okay,
So be really,
yeah,
you know, be
announce
explicit.
your assumptions. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lamia.
Sorry, I'm just looking at that email about the definitions, and they've come back and said that they've made a mistake and that the criteria to be assessed will just be knowledge of Canada, global affairs, Canada, international priorities, no longer the 2020 to 2021 or whatever the dates were. I don't know what's going on.
So weird.
Yeah, it's causing a lot of anxiety.
You know what? That's great. That narrows it down for us.
Oh,
I didn't get that. I didn't get that email. You just got it?
No, so the email that they attached the definitions on.
Oh yeah.
If you look, if you read the beginning part, it says we made an error in sending the criteria to be assessed during the recorded video interview and exam. Here is the list of the criteria that will be evaluated, and they've removed the dates. So that to me means no longer just solely focus on the departmental plan. It could be gap priorities writ large, right?
Yeah, but they have to be ones that are publicly available, right? They can't be anything else.
Okay. But yeah, minor detail.
Because again, remember, this was a competition open to the entire public service. So anything that they're testing has to be open to the entire public service. So if you're relying on things that are internal to global affairs, you may be going off on the wrong foot, on the wrong tangent there. But go ahead, Shariqua.
Thank you. I was just going to add about the question regarding the briefing note. For other written exams or written for GAC competitions, they would specify, like, write a briefing note using the headings like context and background and provide your like recommendations and analysis. So in the question, they will give you some of the headings for you to figure out what the format is, and you can follow that.
Yeah,
or
if that's what's required.
Yeah. So
yeah, so if
there's no template, they'll give you the headings that you have to use, and that'll give you an idea of what format and template to use.
Precisely so. So if you are required to write something, they'll tell you, write this. If you're required to use certain headings, they'll say, use these headings. They will tell you in the question. So whatever the question says, that's what you do. Go ahead, Amal, and then Lamia.
Sorry, my mistake. It's just my hand was, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Lamia.
Same for me, sorry.
Oh, same. Okay, let's see if there are any questions in the chat. Yeah, this is, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is not the greatest. I love that. Immediately, they send something out, and then within 5 minutes, nope, sorry, that was wrong.
So when did they send just that email about the fiscal year, that they aren't specifying a fiscal year? I'm not seeing that, but it's good to know.
It's in the email where they sent the definitions, where they attached the definitions.
Okay, the one that's from this morning.
From, yeah, I got it at like 11:31 a.m. So like
right.
20 minutes ago.
Gotcha.
Okay, so if it were me, then I would go to not the intranet, the internet, and just pull up, the information on Global Affairs Canada's priorities that are available to the whole world, and just look at the most recent one. Go ahead. Sorry, someone making a comment? Go ahead. Okay. All right, you can always jump in later if you'd like. Okay, any questions right now about that particular competency or about that STAR format, how you would approach the question? Any questions about how to read questions? Go ahead, Shariqua.
I was just also going to, as I'm looking through the interview, the definition that they attached in the latest email, it only states the definition at the top. It doesn't go on to the different columns. So it's just that's just an observation I'm just noticing. But yeah, we'll still at least look at column 2 and then take a look at 3. I guess the same as we were planning.
But column 2 and 3 are not available to everybody, right? What's available is the definition that you've just received. That's it.
So then maybe focus on memorizing the keywords from these definitions and weave it into our answer.
That's it. Exactly so.
Thank
and
you.
then think about that from the perspective of an FS2 officer. Go ahead, and then Emily.
Sorry, I don't have. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Go
No, I
ahead.
was just going to say that I don't have access to my emails, so I was just wondering, is there any mention of results orientation or analytical thinking in that most recent email from 20 minutes ago?
Yes, they have judgment within a global context, influencing and alliance building, intercultural proficiency, resilience and adaptability, results orientation, and analytical thinking. Those are the definitions they provided.
Thank you.
I think they just slightly changed the wording, but it's
Yes.
pretty much the same. It's the
Yeah.
same competency.
So the wording in the French of some of the competencies has
In
slightly
English,
changed.
yeah, in English too, I think.
Yeah, maybe so. Have a look. Well, they did change that knowledge of global affairs Canada's international priorities. That's changed slightly because they've taken out the reference to the departmental plan of 2020-2021. Most of the rest look like they're pretty much the same. Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments? No? All right. So if there are no other comments here, anybody wants to make some final comments? If not, then we can bring this session to a close. And then this recording will go up in stream for those of you who have access to the departmental teams, I guess, library of videos. And then I'll also make a YouTube video as well of this particular one and post it as well. All right. That makes sense? How do you feel?
I feel very humbled. I feel very humbled. You know, you can come into these things either overconfident or underconfident or, you know, whichever. But these sessions are really, really helpful to, and truly, like, and I mean humble because, you know, you go into it, you think you've got the answer, and it's really nice to have that structure and have you go over it and give us an example. So I think I speak for all of us when I say that.
You really
Here, Lucas.
You
I
do.
second that.
I've been doing this a long time here. You know, foreign service officer for a while, but none of this is easy. I don't want you to get the impression that this is an easy thing to do. These hoops that you have to jump through in order to be promoted, they're not easy, right? And so it takes a certain practice, it takes mindset, and there are many of us who've had disappointments in the past because, you know, we didn't answer this thing correctly, or we left that out, or we forgot this. So the more that you can practice this kind of thing ahead of time, the better off you're going to be, right? Because this is a whole different skill set, and it's one that the department doesn't teach you. It doesn't teach you how to, you know, go through competitions. It teaches you the subject matter, and so you're quite capable in terms of doing the work. But when you're in these competitions, you have to talk about how to do the work, and that's a different skill, right? Well, c'est juste comme ça. Okay, anything else? We can bring the session to a close.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your attention. Thanks so much for your participation.
Have a good evening, CJ. Thank you.
Take care. So see some of you in a couple hours.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.